Hello everybody. I'm super excited to announce that everyone left off at the same place today in class, so we can pick up and nobody will have to listen to a repeat, which is super exciting. So just to refresh your memory, we were on learning target number 1 and we were talking about how much of a stimulus is necessary for you to sense something. And we had last left off on this concept of sensory adaptation. All right, so when it comes to sensory adaptation, we have all experienced sensory adaptation. Likewise, we've definitely experienced signal detection theory as well. But anyways, so let me give you a scenario here, which we know is really good to write examples in our notes. All right, so here's the scenario. You're getting ready for bed. It's dark out. And you shut the light off and you try to make your way to your bed. Now, if your bedroom is like my bedroom, that is a minefield. There are clothes baskets and clothes and heels and boots in my room on the floor. All of Brian's garbage that he never picks up. Mine is the other stuff, of course. Notice how I didn't call it garbage. You get the idea, okay? I'm sure a sniper gets me almost every night as I make my way to my bed after I shut the lights off, okay? But what happens is over time, gradually the objects of my bedroom start to reappear. They start to become much clearer because my visual system had adjusted to the darkened room. This is what we call sensory adaptation. Sometimes you might have heard of it being called, well, I got used to it, okay? You jumped into the pool or into the lake and it was freezing, but then over time you got used to it. Take a look at our definition. A change in the responsiveness of the sensory system based on the average level of surrounding stimulation. Okay, so what this is saying is that we adapt to our surrounding environment because something else ends up stimulating our system and thus not activating the original stimulus, I should say, is not activated to send neural impulses to the brain. That's basically what's happening here. That's why we get used to it. The sensory system is like, oh, been there, done that, I'm over this. I mean, the same thing goes for smell. Think about how you walk into a room and it reeks like BO or it smells wonderful like a great room freshener or something like that, or a candle, but then over time you're like, don't smell it anymore. You only smell it like when you first walk in. And when you first walk in, the stimulus was enough to cause your sensory receptors to convert that, to use transduction, into a message that the brain could understand. So this is what we call sensory adaptation, when our system is not so responsive over time to certain sensory stimulus. Okay? All right, so I can't say questions about that. So we're going to move to the end here, which is what I wanted you to do in class, but I just want you to think about what your answer would be to this. Putting everything together, so could you answer this question? How much of a stimulus is necessary for you to sense something then? I'm super bad at wait time. This is awkward for me right now. Whatever class it was that we were talking about wait time. Okay, so if I had to answer this question, I would say, well, it kind of depends. It depends on the situation, right? A-T-I-O-N. Boy, this is slow. And it depends on time, right? I mean, if we're talking in the context of time, we're talking about sensory adaptation. Over time, we don't sense something anymore. If we're talking about the situation, there's certain situations of uncertainty that could cause us to detect something that's not there or miss something altogether, right? Okay? And then if we go back here, again, depending upon whether something starts off very high or something starts off very low as far as levels of stimulus go, that would all depend on if our senses sense that. So I think that the best answer for this really would be the situation and time, of course. All right, so thus ends learning target number 1. Oh God. Discard. Okay, God, I thought I shut off the thing. Okay, never mind. Whew! Panic! In rushed the flood of norepinephrine and activating my fight or flight response. Whew! Okay, I'm okay. I'm all right. Now, anyways, next thing that you should do is you should go, I would pause this, by the way. I would pause this and I would go into my Edmodo, and in my Edmodo, there is a learning target number 1 quiz to take. It's 10 questions long. Some people have already taken it. Kudos to them. Some of you might want me to reset this. Sam, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now because we probably shouldn't have taken this test right now, just so you all know. So if you want me to reset it, those of you who took it, just let me know. Anyways, you want to go through and you want to answer the questions, of course, using your notes, and then turn the video back on because we have one more learning target to start. Okay? All right, see you in a bit. It's been a bit. All right, so we are starting learning target number 2 right now, and if you take a look at learning target number 2 is super massive, okay? We're talking about describing sensory processes, like the whole transduction process. How does the eye convert light waves into a message that the brain will understand? How does the ear convert sound waves into a message that the brain can understand for every one of the senses? So we're going to break it down by sense, talk about eyes, then ears, and then we'll move on to the other senses. You need to know, for the AP exam, the main structures and their functions of the eyes and the ears, not so much the other senses. So I'll start with that, and then we'll move into the transduction process for each of those. All right? So our essential question for today, by the way, is what are the structures and the functions of the eye? Now, it's pretty amazing what our eye is actually able to do. It actually kind of blows my mind. Watch this. This is what, I shouldn't say what our eye is able to do, but what our brain is able to do with what our eye senses. That would be a better way to describe this. Watch this. Mind blowing. Be more mind blowing if there was sound. Can you hear that? Because I can't hear that. Oh, are you freaking kidding me? Why doesn't this work? Okay, I'm gonna use the words here, okay? So, basically, what our eye sees is this when it comes to our environment. This is the message that gets sent to the brain of our entire environment, okay? There's splotches, there's blood vessels in the way, and the whole entire image is completely upside down, okay? So the distal stimulus is the environment, what we're talking about. I mean, the stuff that we see that's not like, it's out there, if you will, okay? So what happens here is that image is projected onto the eye and then projected onto the retina. And the retina is where the sensory receptors are for the eye. And the sensory receptors are going to take this upside down, blotchy, blood vessel filled image, and it's going to send that message, it's going to convert that message into a neural impulse, an electrical chemical message that the brain is going to understand. And then it's going to send it up to the thalamus, and the thalamus is going to send it back to the occipital lobe, and the occipital lobe is going to create this image that we see. I mean, that is pretty amazing that is what our brain does. It clears all those blotches out. It clears all those blood vessels out. It converts the image from being upside down to right side up. This good-looking dude, I guarantee you he has ear and nose hair. All right, so anyways, you kind of get the idea here. What we're going to talk about is how does our brain do that? And then how does our eye okay, sense the information so that it can convert that information. So before we can really get started on a lot of that, what we want to talk about is those structures and those functions of the eye. All right? So now would be a really good time to get that handout that I gave you, and of course the notes packets that you should have picked up from my room. In the notes packets you can just follow along, but that handout of the picture of the eye with all the labels might be a good time right now to label as I go along with the different parts of the eye and tell you what their functions are. Okay? Alright, so we'll start with the sclera, and the sclera is the white part of the eye, okay? Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. What war? Oh, that's right, the Revolutionary War. Yay, history buffs. Okay, anyways, the whites of our eyes. Now, the sclera is actually responsible for some pretty important things. Keeping your whole eye put together, kind of important, isn't it? It helps to maintain the shape, because otherwise, if you didn't have the sclera, what would happen is basically what happens when you cut into the eyeball in Miss Steinke's class. There would be oozy-goozy stuff all over the place, and everything would just kind of run, and it would look basically like, well, I don't know, like when you crack an egg. Does that make sense? This is like the outer shell of an egg. The sclera is. It kind of keeps all the yolky fluid, gosh, I want to vomit right now, together. Okay? All right. Now, that's the sclera. That's the whites of the eye. Now, the white of the eye, there's a muscle fibers, and muscle fibers right down here, which in this course we don't need to know the name for, but in biology you do. Okay? There's a kind of clear membrane that's held by these muscle fibers, and this clear membrane is the cornea. Now, the cornea's job is to help to bend the light so that the light will hit the pupil of the eye. Okay? Now, when I say bend the light, I mean bend the light waves that make up this object or this image. Light waves, color waves, and the like. Okay? Alright, so it's going to bend the waves that make up this image so that it can hit the pupil. Now, the pupil is important, okay, because the pupil is that black part of our eye. Alright? And the black part of our eye is actually going to help to let light get into the eye, but it's going to help to get the amount of light in the eye. Okay? So if the pupil is very narrow, very small, it's going to only allow a small amount of light in. But if the pupil is very wide, okay, or very large, it's big round black circle, it's going to allow a lot of light in. Now, this is all dependent upon how much light there is in the environment. If it's very light out, the pupil is going to be very small, allowing a small amount of light in. But if it's dark, the pupil is going to open up. I'm sure you've heard of the concept dilating your pupils. That's opening up the pupils. Now, what allows for the pupils to be able to open up or to be very narrow is the iris. Now, the iris is the colored parts of our eyes. Okay? And the iris is the muscle that opens the pupil or closes that pupil, letting the amount of light in. The pupil can't do that without the iris. Does that make sense? All right. So the light comes in, the amount of light is controlled then, and it hits the lens. And the lens is a transparent kind of gelatinous type of material, okay? It's transparent and it's kind of flexible. It's very disc-like, okay? Now, what this does is this will bend the light to hit the back of the eye wall here, known as the retina, okay? And it's going to try to bend the light right here in this region, which is called the fovea. And the fovea is a very special region because in the fovea, this is where we can see the best. We can see the clearest here, okay? So what our lens tries to do is tries to get that image right on top of that fovea so we can get the best image possible, if that makes sense. And I should say, as far as we don't really see there, but we can get the best message to the brain so that we can get the best image. That makes more sense, okay? All right, now this lens here, by the way, is actually something that over time it changes its curvature and it has a tough time focusing on close objects as we age, which is why so many people end up having to get cheater glasses when they get older. Okay? All right, now the big important part that we want to talk about here is this retina. Now, inside of the retina, this wall here, along the back, and kind of along this bottom part right here too. Okay? So do realize that there's kind of two areas for it. The retina is what allows us to be able to sense and convert color waves and light waves. The retina is where transduction happens. Put a big star on the retina. The retina is very important. The retina takes that light wave, okay, and it converts it into a message that the brain can understand. Now, the retina then transports that message via optic nerve to the brain. And the optic nerve is what gets the message to the thalamus and then, of course, eventually to the occipital lobe for interpretation. Okay? Now, inside the walls of the retina are some very, very special structures. Okay? Inside the walls of the retina, the back of the retina, the light goes to the back of the retina and then messages work their way up here, as you can see. So the light comes in, which is like our images, okay? And the rods are able to convert light information, light, dark, okay? Size, shape, those types of things, distance, etc., into information that the brain can understand. Now the cones are much smaller and kind of fatter. The cones are able to convert color information. And so how I remember the difference here is C is cone and C is color. And then rods are for light. Okay? So all color information is converted into a message that the brain can understand by the cones. So the transduction is happening in the retina here, okay? And then at this point we have an electrical chemical message right at the end here of our cones that then gets sent to the bipolar cells of the retina wall, and the bipolar cells send that neural message to the ganglion cells, and these are all sensory neurons here, to the ganglion cells, and the axons of the ganglion cells make up that optic nerve that we were talking about. And so that message then goes straight to the thalamus, okay, via the optic nerve, and then eventually from the thalamus back to the occipital lobe for interpretation. All right? Okay, so here's kind of a close-up kind of picture, okay? Cones, color, rods, black and white, used for dimly lit light, thin and long. They're not located on the fovea, okay? Color, however, and we use it in well-lit areas. They're short and fat, and they are located on the fovea, okay? Now, there's a space that I need you guys to see here. Hold on a minute. And that's our blind spot. It's very special. It's special because our blind spot is located right where the optic nerve goes back, right where those ganglion cells, the axon of those ganglion cells, are creating a neural network of information going back. The reason why this is a blind spot in our vision, in our field of vision, is because that's where that optic nerve is, and there are no rods and cones in this area. You can see there's like a break that takes place here, okay? So that's why we have a blind spot. When we come back to class on Monday, we'll do a little activity where we'll all find our blind spots. So that will be highly exciting. All right, so at this point, I am done lecturing. Okay, we're going to discard any of those. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to make sure that you have your labeling sheet filled out, and we'll check that on Monday. And I would also like you to jump to your homepage for Edmodo. And in your homepage, I'd like you to go into your folders. And in your folders, I'd like you to go into Unit 6. And in Unit 6, I would like you to open up the Visual System Graphic Organizer. Now, from the lecture that I just gave, I want you to spend some time learning and practicing with the structure of the eye, the structures, I should say, of the eye, what their functions are, and also think of a memory cue to help you remember that the sclera is the white part of the eye that holds its shape. And then think of something to help you remember that the sclera is the white part of the eye that holds the shape, okay? And you want to have this completed by Monday, just so that you have some time actually processing this information in your brains and laying those pathways so that you can use them when you take the test, okay? All right, of course you need to make a copy of this, as always. All right. After you do that, after you play with this information a little bit, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the quiz on the structure and the functions of the eyes. There's 7 questions. Question 1 is all matching, and then of course there is some function questions, what each of the parts of the eye do. Okay, so you're going to want to have this done by Monday as well. I'm kind of feeling right now like it would be beneficial to show you the answers to the labeling sheet, but then you might not do it. So, okay, you go ahead and you do that and you take the quiz, and if we have some problems, we'll talk about it on Monday. Okay? All right, have a great weekend. Please make good choices. All right.